Hello and welcome to this class on The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. This class, I should say. Very classy here, so we use the R vowel, not the A vowel. Such is my northern heritage. We're going to be looking at The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe, and I'm just going to really take my time. I've set a timer. I've got about 40 minutes, so this video will be a bit less than that. I don't know if we'll get through the entire thing in that time because there's so much to go through, but I just wanted to show the Speechsmith's approach, the process I would go through to bring life to this text. And it's the same thing that I would apply to any text. Just tilt my phone a little bit more this way. Because, yeah, it doesn't matter what's on the page. What matters is your process of how you're approaching those dead words on the page and bringing them to life. The Raven, a little bit of context. Apparently, at the time of writing, Edgar Allan Poe's wife, I forget her name, I could look it up quick. I got my MacBooks chilling here with a bit of prep. So her name was, let's see here, let's do the proper honors. Okay. Her name was Virginia Poe. And apparently at the time, she was quite unwell. And he was going through a lot of things, caring for her, worrying about her death coming. I'm not sure if it happened or not. But he was focusing a lot on this theme of grief. An interesting point, actually, he wrote some essays afterwards talking about all the planning and everything that went into this poem. And he said that he wanted to focus on this character of Lenore, who we'll discover, who was, in his mind, the most beautiful thing in poetry, I think he said, or the most tragic thing in poetry, was a woman, a lost woman. Let's see here. He wrote in the Philosophy of Composition, explaining how he constructed the poem, a beautiful dead woman as the subject because he considered it the most poetical topic in the world. A raven because it can speak but remains dark and ominous. The word nevermore because it's a mournful sound. And all these things we're going to get into. But the point I want to make now is that this is something very closely related to his own life. Lenore is not his actual wife, but she is the character as an object of his grief, the person he's missing. It was very important to make that link. Anyway, I could have said that better. But let's get into this. So, line 1. In fact, I'll just read the first stanza. I'm going to read it just plain without much life so you can feel the contrast. It's really hard to read this without giving life to it. But once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. I butchered it on purpose. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. Only this and nothing more. Pretty simple, right? Man, I think a lot of people would read it that way when you first pick it up. I've been working on it now for a little bit. It's got all these like frayed endings and all the keywords and stuff. I've slashed the full stops because they're the end of the thought, so we want to hit that nice and clear. I've underlined verbs, I've highlighted keywords and images. And so we're going to go through all this, right? Those are the emphasis points, the things you emphasize. So let's look at the full stops first. Opening paragraph has 2 sentences. The first is 4 lines long, and there's a lot of punctuation in there. And ideally, we'd want to breathe at the punctuation. I wouldn't want to do the entire 4 lines without breathing all the way to the full stop. So I'm going to breathe at punctuation, ideally at the end of a line, and sometimes in the middle as well. I think it's quite a long thought, So I don't mind taking little snatch breaths in the middle of the line to provide that pausing, because it's also a story that is being told first person, looking back at the past like it's a memory. And he makes that really clear. So there's this element of reliving, and I want to relive, I don't want to retell. So I want to discover it all in the moment. So there's these moments where the thought's moving, something's happening, and that's where the punctuation comes in. So let's breathe at the punctuation, and let's try to follow the thought first of what's really happening. Because when I read it a minute ago, you might not have got what's actually happening. So, once upon a midnight dreary, comma, while I pondered, comma, weak and weary, comma, end of line. So we lift the word weary because it's at the end of the line. Weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore. Hyphen. So the first line, there's 3 clauses. Second line, there's 1 all the way through. So it starts off a little. It's like this long opening, sucking us into the scene. Then there's the hyphen, where a thought is broken. A comma is an ordered change of direction in the thought. A hyphen is where the thought's broken. Why? He's napping. He's almost falling asleep here. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore. There he was, sitting there with his books. While I nodded, it's almost like he's getting lost in his books again. While I nodded, nearly napping, comma, comma, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping. Keyword suddenly, verb tapping. Suddenly there came a tapping. We make the keywords clear and we lean into the verbs. Comma, end of line. As of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. Full stop. So we get the scene, the exposition to the story. There's a few images here. Midnight dreary, quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore. I mean, what's a dreary midnight? A cold, wet, windy night, out there in the woods alone, in his little cabin. Did he say he's in a cabin? I feel like he did. Maybe I'm making that up though. Then, in my mind, he's in a cabin out in the woods. Then he's got a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore. I'm picturing some big old dusty book. It's like this old tome of a book. This goes back many years. It's got like creased spine, maybe some pages falling out. You have to keep it stacked up. And he's reading about some stories in here, some myths and fables. While I nodded, nearly napping. You know, when you're really tired and you listen to that alliteration, nodded, nearly napping. Suddenly, and then the jarringness of suddenly, there came a tapping. As of someone gently rapping. Gently. Keyword. So when I say gently, we should hear gentleness. As of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. I put that maybe as an image, but we can't really see it. It's like it's a sound, but we can imagine it. Rapping at my chamber door. And I like the napping, tapping, rapping. It sounds like there's consonants in the middle. Rapping, tapping, napping. Sounds like the tapping. 'Tis some visitor. Then the next sentence. 'Tis some visitor, I muttered. Let me mutter that. 'Tis some visitor, I muttered. 'Tis some visitor, voice change, I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. Only this and nothing more. 'Tis some visitor, comma, end of quote, so I do that in the muttery voice. I muttered in my narrator present time voice, but still reflecting on the story like it's a memory. Back into back into a quote, tapping at my chamber door. So I'm back there in the cabin with the tapping outside on a dreary night. It's getting very late. I'm there falling asleep over my book, and I'm muttering, what is that? 'Tis some visitor, I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. Only this and nothing more. Keyword only. Why would you say that? In the next verse, it sort of explains why. I think he's a little bit like, oh, what's that? He's a bit jarred. Interesting use of the word chamber as well, chamber door. It gives it this really Edgar Allan Poe sort of like mystical, magical feeling, the chamber. It's not like tapping at my door, at my front door, at my house's door, my cabin's door. It's my chamber door. Here he is in his chamber, poring over his books of lore like a potions master. Only this, he's convincing himself, only this, nothing more. It can't be anything else. It's just some visitor tapping at my chamber door. Nothing to worry about. Right? Because, distinctly I remember it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember, the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghosts upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow, vainly I did say. There's this sort of feeling of maybe dread and spookiness late at night. And that's why I think he says the only that way. So let's go for this from the top. And we'll continue 3 sentences, the first paragraph into the beginning of the second paragraph. And they all have a very repetitive structure all the way through, which is interesting. It follows rhythm and rhyme. But let's do a read first, and then we'll come back to that. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. 'Tis some visitor, I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. Only this, and nothing more. Distinctly I remember it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. A couple of things I haven't talked about. The verbs. Pondered. Sort of lean into the verb. Pondered. You do it. When you say the verb, you do it. You do the action. Ponder. While I pondered. Keywords weak and weary. I didn't really get that in, I don't think. The weak and weariness. I just said weak and weary. Don't get sucked into the rhythm. There's this really nice musical rhythm all the way through. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary. It's rhyming in the line. That's one line. Over many a quaint speeds up. Over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore. Dum-dee-dee. Over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore. So the first line is, once upon a midnight dreary. So it starts off on a stressed syllable. Now I'm talking about verse, meter. There should be roughly, let's see how many. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary. 16 syllables in the line. It's a lot. And we're going to start with a stressed syllable. Usually in verse, you get maybe 10 syllables. And it will be dee-dum, 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 dee-dum. Iambic pentameter. I am. 5 of them. I am. 10 syllables. Why is this important? We got to stress at the start. It's starting off unconventionally. And when you think about it, he doesn't preamble like, it was a long time ago, but he starts the way all great stories do. Once upon a time. Once upon a... That word once, just bang, we're there. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. I want to avoid doing that rapping at my chamber. We should, where there's no punctuation and there's a line of verse, we should go through without the pauses. And because there's so many clauses here, he makes it quite simple to go through without... What did I say? There's no pauses. Because there's a lot of punctuation here, we can take lots of breaths. So each thought, I think, especially in the middle of the line, should continue. Maybe there's a slight hesitation in the middle of the line if there's punctuation, but where we've got rapping at my chamber door, there shouldn't be a pause after rapping, because we just had one at a little comma just before. As of someone gently rapping. There it is in the middle of the line. Rapping at my chamber door. You want to find excuses to crack on with the verse. Don't be lingering around after every other word. You could go, once upon a midnight dreary. It's taking too long. We've got 16 syllables in this one line of verse. We need to get through. And he's written it in this really rhythmic way. You don't want to disrupt it too much. Last time this verse, then we'll move on. Once upon a midnight dreary. Listen to the rhythm. While I pondered, weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. 'Tis some visitor, I muttered, tapping at my chamber door, only this and nothing more. Comma. Distinctly I remember, it was in the bleak December, semicolon. What was in the bleak December? And each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Full stop. This spooky scene where even the sparks, the embers from the fire, create these flickery shadows, phantasma the mind can begin to project upon, as we're going to see as this thing progresses, that he's going to start to do quite tragically, actually. So now we've got, again, starting with a stressed syllable, ah. And you don't want to say it like, ah. People throw away the ahs and the ohs and the u's. Distinctly I remember. It was in the bleak December. Maybe too fond, given where the context goes. I know the ending, so let me change. You can guess the ending from my rendition of this ah. Vowels are carries all the emotion, all the tonal meaning. I'm trying to put myself there. Ah. It's too much pleasure. I'm too much enjoyment. Ah. 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 Distinctly I remember. It was in the bleak December. Distinctly I remember it was in the bleak December. Distinctly I remember it was in the bleak December. It was in the bleak December. Image, keyword. And each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow. Vainly I had sought to borrow from my books surcease of sorrow. Sorrow for the lost Lenore. I did it again. I paused where there was no punctuation. Sorrow for the lost Lenore. Drive through the thought. The punctuation is there to tell you where the thought is going and what the thought does. And especially when we've got hyphens. Eagerly I wished the morrow, semicolon, and a hyphen. Vainly I had sought to borrow from my books surcease of sorrow, hyphen, sorrow for the lost Lenore, hyphen, for the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore, hyphen, nameless here forevermore, full stop. Hyphens are when the thought is interrupted. Tapping at my chamber door, only this and nothing more, is showing the movement of the mind when it suddenly makes a switch. That's his mind trying to hide what else could it be, the tapping? And here we've got, eagerly I wished the morrow. Eagerly I wished the morrow. Semicolon. Why did you wish the morrow? Let me tell you after this semicolon here. Vainly I had, but then there's a hyphen. So he's going to tell us, but there's a little bit of a tangent before he tells us. Eagerly I wished the morrow. Vainly I had sought to borrow from my books surcease of sorrow, sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore, nameless here forevermore. Eagerly, keyword. Eagerly. What does eagerly mean? I'd really like that to happen. I wished, verb, wished the morrow. Keyword. You don't wish the eggs, the jam, the holiday. You wish the morrow, tomorrow. We're in the bleak December night. I just want the sun to rise again and I can get out of this dark gloominess. So there's already a seed of the sort of mood he's in. I mean, it's all throughout these first two stanzas here. So much inside of it. If you pay close attention to the wordings, he's late into the night. He's in a gloomy mood. He's trying to distract himself with these books. Why? Because vainly, like he's trying to, but it's not working, he sought to borrow, tried, he sought, verb, to borrow. Please, books, can you lend me? Surcease of sorrow, an abatement, a pause, rest, surcease of sorrow. He's in pain, he's feeling the sorrow. What for? Sorrow for the lost Lenore. He doesn't say like, oh, I was really missing Lenore, so I was looking at my books to distract myself. His thought is almost like he's trying not to touch on the Lenore thing until later. He's like, his mind's trying to hide it from himself. Maybe a theme throughout the poem. He's got this disordered mind. He's not doing well. Eagerly I wished the morrow. Vainly I had sought to borrow from my books surcease of sorrow. Sorrow for the lost Lenore. Did it again, pause. Sorrow for the lost Lenore. Then it felt like I was having to admit it to myself. When you drive the thought on through the places where there's no punctuation, if you want to stop there, drive the thought on, and then you might see, like if you back engineer, like just then I did it, instead of sorrow for the lost Lenore, it's sorrow for the lost Lenore. There's like a drive to the end of the clause as he's remembering Lenore, like it's almost like the admission. Sorrow for the lost Lenore. Hyphen. That sounded like a full stop. Sorrow for the lost Lenore. For the rare. Because then the thought crashes in when he says Lenore. Oh, the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore. I should get through all that without breathing. Sorrow for the lost Lenore. For the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore. And then he remembers with a new hyphen. Nameless here forevermore. And here is in italics. Nameless here forevermore. I don't know what that means. She's nameless. He's using a name. But I guess it's like it means she's not there. She has passed, I would suppose. And there's more clues to that later on. Okay, those are the first two stanzas. 4 sentences. I don't know how many clauses, like a dozen or a couple of dozen. There's a lot there. Here we go. Verbs, keywords, images, punctuation, full stops, following the thought, putting ourselves there, reliving it in the moment. Not knowing exactly what we're going to say next, but finding the words to describe what's happening. And even though it's in the past tense, it's like it's happening all now for the first time. I see my mic's flashing, so I really hope sound is recording. Let's find out. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. "Only this and nothing more." Ah, distinctly I remember it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow. Vainly I had sought to borrow from my books surcease of sorrow, sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore. Nameless here forevermore. And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before. So that now, to still the beating of my heart, I stood repeating, "'Tis some visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. Some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. This it is, and nothing more." Presently, My soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. Sir, said I, or madam, truly your forgiveness I implore, but the fact is I was napping, and so gently you came tapping, and so faintly you came rapping, tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you. Here I opened wide the door. Darkness there, and nothing more. I'm adding some pauses on those end of lines, and I'm thinking maybe I shouldn't. Darkness there, and nothing more. That doesn't make sense. Someone was just napping and rapping and tapping. I mixed up a rapping and tapping at one point as well. Okay, so then we've got the next two verses. The next two verses, loads of alliteration. The alliteration continues throughout, actually. Napping, tapping, rapping, rapping, tapping. We got nodded, nearly napping. We got rare and radiant. Books surcease of sorrow, sought to borrow from my books surcease of sorrow, sorrow for the lost Lenore. And now we've got, and the silken, sad, uncertain rustling almost sounds like the rustling of the curtains. Imagine you're sitting there late at night and you hear the curtains. Like this. It might creep you out, right? Especially in them days. When was this? Let's find out. When did he write this? Let's get an answer to this so we can add some more context, so we can place ourselves right there. 9 questions. Who am I? Where am I? When is it? What do I want? Why do I want it? What's in my way? How do I overcome what's in my way? What happens if I don't get what I want? And what's my relationship to the person I'm speaking to? When is it? When was this written? So we're late at night in the bleak December, after the death of Lenore, a dearly beloved wife. It was published January 29th, 1845. Okay. Yeah. 1845. Before the World Wars. Yeah, that's the middle of the 19th century. The earlier part. Different world. Imagine that. No technology, no phones. Superstition, I reckon it's got to be up there. But they've got that biblicalness, and we're going to see that actually, that they've got this devout Christian heritage mindset that contends with the supernatural themes that go on throughout this entire thing. And we see that happening, this battle between, oh, no, but God loves us, God's sorting it out, God's got my back. But